Welcome, everyone. I'm Mike Mershazadeh.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
And you're listening to the What Matters podcast, and our mission
to spotlight top RIAs, wealth managers, and investment professionals who are redefining wealth management.
Join us as we dive into their journey, strategies, and insights.
Whether you're an investor or an inspiring pro, this is for you.
Get ready for impactful conversations on the What Matters podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the What Matters podcast. I'm Mike Mershazadeh.
And I'm Ashley Ward.
Today, we're honored to have Tony Mazzali joining us. Tony is the CEO of CG Financial Services as managing partner of Capital Asset Advisory Services and CG Advisory Network. Welcome to our show, Tony.
Thank you.
Tony, it's fantastic to have you join us today. Let's go way back, start with your origin story. You have over 25 years of experience in the industry. Your journey must be quite remarkable. Can you share with us how you embarked on your career and the experiences that led you to where you are today as CEO of CG Financial Services?
So sure, Ashley, I was a kind of a transplant into the industry where I had come originally to the local area in Michigan where I'm at, out of college, preparing to go to law school. And thankfully, I say thankfully now, but at the time, I was approved and accepted into a law school that had a wait list. And that required me to kind of wait around for a year and a half. And my intent was to practice tax and business law. And I answered an ad from one of the industry, at the time, larger firms that said, come work in the finance field. So I figured I'd try it for a year and then jump into law school. And as they say, the rest is history. I never looked back, never went to law school, continued to progress. I had a successful couple of years getting trained and kind of built up into the industry and gaining knowledge that allowed me to start the baseline of, what we did on my own in terms of building this firm. So I started as someone that wanted to come from the legal end, but then once I got exposed to the full kind of financial planning, wealth management spectrum, I just took off. And that was what enabled me to kind of fuel into my own firm and then kind of build from there.
Really cool.
Very cool. And that was then when you went into CG, what year was that?
That would have been right around 1998. So I spent the first 4 to 5 years, and I'm being general there, but working in a career shop. I got great training. Our focus was training on financial planning. I worked for a gentleman that was a top leader in the organization that really focused on leadership training, management training, scoping in terms of full-on financial planning, full engaged advice. So I really got a good, what I call, initial introduction to the business. And it was a very, we had a very strict training program. So, you learned everything to do with a core process. Everything was done, followed by all, with scripts. And it really enabled us to kind of understand how to do the business from the start. And then that was what I built on.
So let me ask you this. Ultimately, back, that was 1998. When did you break off on your own?
That was 98 when we broke off from our own.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So I, myself and a large group of those people left the career shop in one kind of transition. And then from there, probably, 6 months, a year in, I established my own firm after we left the career shop. And that's where I started CG, just kind of decided to do it on my own. I had a firm focus in my mind, kind of a strategy. And that's where I just cut out and started with myself. So it was me and one person that started the firm. Today, we have about 84 employees,
Wow.
Close to $4 billion in assets. So it all started with an initial kind of risk proposition, just taking the risk, but knowing with the training I had and the experience that I'd gained, just being able to kind of build it from there.
So as you say that you guys have now built $4 billion in assets there, you obviously took, practices that you learned at the career shop, plugged them into CG, right?
Yeah.
And tell me about that. Did you start training advisors from the ground up? How was your growth there? Was it organic, inorganic?
Yeah, good question. So initially, my experience at the career shop was I worked in new advisor development, which meant training new advisors, which is taking them from, right out of college to being successful in a year and a half and, formatting professional dress, everything from how you speak professionally to how you initiate, sell, source, and find, the right clients. All of that, and then provide them, a good quality advice and maintain the engagement. So that was, the initial part. Then I worked for a while in what we call team practices, which was a fairly new phenomenon at that time. Today, it's widely used, but we in team practices essentially evolved from, there were older advisors that had lots of clients and resources that needed to be paired up with younger advisors that had lots of spirit and talent, but not a lot of clients. And it's a pretty simple math equation. I mean, if we pair those two up and then align them with a third, which is someone that's process focused and organized, it keeps everybody going in their proper direction. And we'd had quite a bit of success completing that in the career shop, and I kind of folded that into the firm, and that's really how we adopted some of our practice alignment. So, those were two: that new advisor development, recruitment and development, training people on how to get started in the industry, combined with the experience at the longer end of taking a seasoned practice and making it now run with a high growth multiple and efficiently. And you combine those two together, and that's kind of, what we operated on for quite a few years.
Wow. So you're saying that you're to get to 4 billion of AUM there, you guys had essentially built a system organically with taking kids right out of college. Kind of, I'm not going to cheapen the word, but Edward here in Arizona, Edward Jones is pretty big out here. That's like they grab them right out of college, right? And then on top of that, you would accompany them with a senior advisor, and then have what I guess it would be called like some sort of an account manager to keep them organized and to watch over their accounts, kind of form like a tripod type teams there.
Yeah. So, you're essentially aligning what now, I mean, if you would have talked to me 15 years ago, I wouldn't have the value of the last number of years of experience, but it's been fine tuned to where we see clearly a skill set with advisors that work what we call the front part of the client engagement, finding the client, engaging the client, and initiating the initial onboard of the right client with the right service at our firm. Then we have a second skill set, which is another advisor that, after that's been done, that maintains the engagement, which is incrementally following the process that's been established to efficiently and effectively deliver the advice that's needed for that client to maintain their engagement, right? Which is just incremental advice along the way, until a life event, a transition point comes up. Then that first advisor comes back in, because their skill set is usually restructuring the entire engagement around a difference in the circumstances. And then that third person is the relationship manager. They are the point of contact and the kind of the organizer of the entire orchestra of services that client's coming in contact with. And if you carry that through those, and they really keep them aligned with systems, process, it becomes pretty efficient to, deliver that client experience and to make sure that it's quality across the firm.
Really cool. And so you mentioned something about taking a seasoned firm and plugging it into your model. I guess there's different terminologies for that. We would call it here probably inorganic growth. Had you guys went out there and taken other firms that were, a couple $100 million, plugged them into your firm, and then grew them from there? When did that come about?
Yeah, so we acquired our first firm just shortly after 2000, and we'd completed probably 6 acquisitions since then.
Wow.
And we've gotten better, and even now we look a little differently. The last 3 years, we've kind of been reorganizing to get focused on what the next 10 years looks like. And we've kind of reestablished what our focus is for acquisitions and organic growth going forward. But yes, to your point, part of our value proposition when we buy a firm is providing that organization to firms that aren't necessarily organized that way, because it helps more effectively engage the client and also more efficiently manage your in-house operations.
Well, you know what? I have a curious question there, and Ashley, sorry if I'm robbing any of your time
No.
there. This is this is always these are always things that intrigue me the most, right? Because put it this way, I think Ashley and I have probably rounded at this point of doing over 100 podcasts in the last 6 months since we started. So we get we get the opportunity of meeting a lot of industry professionals, and I always like hearing what everyone's how everyone has built their business, and part of the reason why we have the podcast. But when you've taken now 7 different firms, you've plugged them into CG. Culturally, how did you get everybody to how'd you get everybody aligned there? Right? Was it, do they operate different? Do they all operate differently? And there's one set of core values that they all have to really abide by, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, good question. And again, where we stand today, those are all components of migrating a new firm. Early on, the value of experience has showed me that we just solve problems with muscle and grit. I mean, that's how we did it early. Is there wasn't a lot of sourcing of core values, of strategic alignment, of client segmentation, which are all components now of evaluating our proper candidates for acquisition. But that's those are all things that have happened through either just seeing it done the wrong way or having done it the wrong way and having to muscle through it. We've engaged over a number of industry consultants over the last 5 years, which I stay pretty attuned to. A lot of the people that are kind of at that pillar, commenting on industry best practices to try to stay ahead of those things. So in our framework today, when we acquire a firm, absolutely having a core value alignment, having an alignment on strategically how we're looking at it, even geographic alignment. Where do we want to be geographically and not?
I think this is my last question on that. Had all those different firms that you guys had acquired over the years, are they all under CG, or are there different DBAs that they operate under?
So in our environment, we have 2 different tracks. To answer your question directly, the 7 firms we bought are all CG firms. So those would be 100% owned and W-2 employees of CG. But we also have an affiliation model where we have roughly 65 to 70 affiliate advisors with varying degrees of engagement that are independent, their own letterhead, their own logo, and we operate as kind of their strategic alliance of back office compliance, and we offer practice management and or best practices in terms of execution strategy. So though that part of the firm continues to grow rapidly because it's really based on the premise that independent firms are having more and more challenges where it's requiring them to really look at what are my outsourcing options, and rather than as an alternative to just private equity sell or aggregator sell, whether it be a private equity backed aggregator or just a pure aggregator. That's kind of one alternative that says, we're not big enough. We don't want to continue to try to operate under this. So let's just sell. We tend to be an alternative to that, where they can outsource components, still maintain their independence, still maintain their identity, but create efficiencies within their firm that they didn't have there before.
Really cool.
Very cool. Wow, it's fascinating to hear about that and how now you guys are close to 4 billion. But I had another question that I wanted to ask you, but thinking back to when you guys started, it was just you and your partner, I assume. What kind of book did you guys start with? Was it just both of your guys' books of business? And then
No, we started, all honesty, we started with 2 clients. And I had,
wow,
I really did. We built practices. My prior relationship with the career shop and then the manager I worked for had moved me around. I did some work out the West Coast in Oregon. I did some work back in the market of Detroit, and we built practices up. But I was kind of the person that came in and worked with specific clients and never really established a firm, my own practice. I worked in a lot of practices. So when I stepped out, I was starting with new relationships. And, we had, again, initially leaned into a CPA affiliation model. So that was one of the first things that I did, which was establish kind of partnership arrangements with CPA firms. that shared our kind of strategic vision for the client. So we had success with that. Then we started into acquisition. I grew through bringing on a few advisors, training, building a training program, and then it kind of continued to snowball from there. And then that was kind of what I'll call first gen CG. What's really kind of cool about our firm is that first gen CG, every one of them became a partner. So they were partners along the way for 23, 24 years.
Wow.
Second gen CG came in. Several of them became partners, and and we look around. This was an inflection point for our firm because it was kind of a strategic realignment. And we looked, and the majority of they've been here the whole time, and it started from this one kind of seed, and then you've got multiple branches now that they're people's career tracks. So we're at like CG third gen.
Wow.
They're getting trained by now. That creates challenges, and it's a great story, but it creates some challenges too, because part of our realignment, we had to seek some outside input to kind of break the thinking as we look forward, because it tends to be a little bit of an echo chamber when you have all the people that have grown up in the same system with the same leadership team. We have to look at something a little bit different. So anyway, it was helpful to get some outside input as we went through that.
So, do you still have individuals that started working for you in 98 that are still there right now?
Yeah. I mean, the original person that left with me just retired.
Wow.
He's semi-retired. He's still here in a different capacity, but I don't know that he'll ever leave. And the 2.0 gen is all still here. They're all still partners. In fact, they're senior leaders. Some of them are on the leadership team now, where we have formal full-time positions, because we've evolved from a high-performing practice to an actual business now. We have to have CEO, CFO. That was a kind of another change here in the last 4 years, is establishing a real full-time management team. So, that was a bit of a challenge, because it involved taking some of these relationships over the last 20 years now that maybe weren't suited best to be in leadership team management capacity full time. I mean, we were wearing multiple hats, and it was a time to make a choice. Where do you fit? So that was a challenge of the past several years.
And when you said that you had said the breakup of your business, about how those 7 firms that you acquired, they're all CG. You had mentioned you said 65 or 70 other individuals. When you said you had 80 some odd employees, is that in addition to the 80 some odd employees you have, or is that in total?
That's in total. So our 80 employees are only our employees. They don't. The other 64 firms have their own employees.
Gotcha.
Yep. So they effectively affiliate with us by choice, and we deliver services to them. And there's a menu of services that they can take, a small number of services, or they can take a larger number of services. There's also firms that we have a track where we will do a minority purchase. There are some firms today looking to bring on a partner of a larger size, number one, either for succession or for strategy, for capital to grow. Again, to keep them advising clients, because that's what they're good at. And it's becoming more and more evident that if you aren't running your firm every day, if there's somebody not actually running the firm, running the business, it's really hard to just become an advisor. And a lot of these original firm owners, it's kind of one of the challenges of the industry now, is how do I run the firm, run the business, and advise my clients? And they tend to be really, really good at, one or the other. Sometimes you get people that are good at both, but in today's world, the requirement of running the firm is becoming more and more a full-time job.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And what do you consider some of the most effective strategies or practices that have propelled your firm to its current success?
Well, I mean, hard work. I mean, most that know me, I mean, there is no, and that's probably one of the, honestly, one of the challenges we have in the current environment is, I mean, translating back to early times, back to the 98, 95, and what I was taught. When we taught new advisors, their degree that they came in the door with was basically a place marker. Now you learned the business. Today, the expectation kind of the expectation, right, wrong, or indifferent. I believe there's a lot more to it, but that degree kind of gets you in the door, and then your real training starts when you land at your, and that's where a lot of the real training shops that existed they don't exist today because of the rearrangement of the financial structure in the industry has not allowed for a lot of capital out there to really formally train advisors. And kind of my challenge to a lot of the younger advisors is, are you really training yourself? Are you challenging yourself to become a good advisor? Or are you really just buying what the industry kind of sells you as to this degree? And are you doing the hard work to become that kind of top level? Because they all really look at a career track, and many of them look at my career track and say, I want to have your career track. I said, well, then, start sleeping about 6 hours and reading a lot of books. And
I was just going to say
that. How do I do it? And they don't necessarily, that's not the message they want to hear, right? But unfortunately, that's the reality. That to be considered or try to strive to be at the top of your industry, it's going to be a lot of work, and it's worth it.
Right.
And I'll tell you this, I wholeheartedly agree with you, because I was on a podcast with my twin brother maybe less than a month ago. And, we were asked the question, why don't you guys ever talk about your failures? And I go, do you remember about 15 minutes ago when we started talking about our failures and you changed the subject on us? And she goes, I didn't realize I did that. I said, of course you didn't. Nobody wants to hear about your failures. Today, we're in a world where, listen, I'll just say, people are soft, right? And they want instant gratification. There's a sense of entitlement going on. There's a lot of, and, I think COVID made that a heck of a lot worse, if I could call it how it is.
Yeah.
And, when all those things took place, this instant gratification, this get rich quick overnight, and don't have to work hard for it. Everybody should be rich. Everybody should be, have a nice big company and get accolades and these. And in reality, it's just a bunch of second place trophies and third place trophies given out to individuals to make them feel warranted for work that they've never accomplished. And, I know I went through the same, path as you did in regards to building my organization. And I can tell you that when you said, start sleeping 6 hours, and guess what? And start reading. And when you're not working, what's going on in your mind is your business, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to go home to your wife. And then when she's talking to you about this, that, and the other, but your mind's focused on the business and you get called out for it. And then you have to, then you have a bigger problem to focus on there, and how to compartmentalize all that. And it's not for everyone, right? It is putting in the work, and it is making the business your life. And, just by looking at you, I can tell you that, in your earlier years, and probably still a lot to this day, that you put your business, before a lot of other things, right? The numbers show for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, and that's the challenge, right? Because a lot of, as I shared with a lot of our, second generation, third generation advisors now that as we're engaging them in our practice, right? So now we're introducing them to the client relationships. How do you translate the number of holiday phone calls you took to make sure that those clients have been around for 20 years? How do you how do you replace that? And the people that I'm handing that life's work to, that maybe, how does that value exchange get acknowledged? That I will take care of these clients like you did. Now, they don't have to build the firm, and they're already in a firm that's built.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of stuff they don't have to do. But I think as firm owners, and I'll speak for myself, but I think as I talk to, I have a lot of firm owners in my circle that I talk to, the expectation is just do the work with the clients to take care of them that I did to keep them. And if you can commit to that and put the grit in to do that, you're a good candidate for me to pass my clients to, or at least engage my clients. If I can't assure that you're doing that, then and that's not the case today. And I've talked to universities about this. So we've helped initiate at least 3 CFP programs at universities. In fact, one of them I taught for a couple of years, the capstone course for the CFP curriculum, just to kind of get it started. And I give the finance, this was a number of years ago, and I give the finance head a lot of credit, because my feedback to the department was, this needs to be a cold shower to the students before they head out into this career, and to determine, do I really want to do this? And he bought into that principle. So the capstone course was a tough course. I had 22 student complaints the first year I taught it.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
And we were in one department meeting, and of course all the other department professors were in there, and some of them brought that up, and they didn't appreciate the fact that I was in the room as a non-PhD that was advising students and giving and having that much input on curriculum. But my point was that I shared with them. I said, if they don't have these skills, for example, if they didn't have their work done, I still made them come to the board with a marker and explain their case study off the cuff. I said, you don't get that option in front of a client. If you didn't do your homework before you went into the meeting, you have to stand up here and still talk to the client. The client's still here in the lobby waiting for you. So if you didn't take the time last night to review the file, the client expects you to be able to talk. And we're the client today in the class. And it made students really uncomfortable having to do that. And they complained, but I said, that's life. That's the way this is going to work. Would that be tolerated today at a university? I don't think so.
No.
And I don't know that that's right, but that's real life. I mean, our clients, are they getting less because people aren't offering that, or that's not the way they're trained? I don't know. I just can, and maybe it's just because, as we say, people are getting older in the industry, and I'm one of those that's starting to get gray. You look back and say, "Oh, this is the way we used to do it," and I get it. There's a lot more efficient ways to do things, but that human contact, the trust that people place, to me, is still a currency that's got old. It's still of an old currency that we have to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll share something quick with you. Ashley has been working with me for about 7 years now, right? So prior to partnering with Joe Duran and being in private equity in the RIA space, my twin brother and I, we were in the Ginnie Mae security, mortgage-backed security world, right? We owned probably, I would say it was the 11th largest mortgage bank in America at the time. So we had, gosh, hundreds, 600-700 salespeople at our company. And so I had TV monitors wrapped around about 70,000 square feet of office space, right? And, if you're, whoever's name was in green, it was yellow or red, right? Red meant, if you don't have a good month, you're out, right?
Yeah.
And yellow meant, you're safe, but pick it up. And then whoever's in green was doing well. And I remember being pulled aside to HR saying, we got to take the TV monitors down. Why? This is sales, right? These are numbers, and it's like, well, it's very demoralizing. We've gotten X amount of complaints, and I couldn't believe it. And then so, later on, I gotten, as an owner of the company, I got knowledge of who made a lot of the complaints. And what astonished me the most was it was like individuals that I had hired out of the military. Right. And I was like, I thought they were the toughest,
Yeah.
I thought I was bulletproof with those guys. Right. Figuratively speaking. But it's I'm like you, I'm a bit of a hard ass, and, it's the way I had to learn. And I don't think I would have done it differently because, you become you become a hard, when you learn things in that type of an environment, you become so much stronger than your competition. And I think if you don't mind me asking, do you think that that's what's made CG, you guys, and where your AUM is and where you've built your company, you guys are definitely in the upper echelon of RIAs, right? In size and in employee count. Do you think having that mentality and having that grit has gotten you there?
No question. I mean,
Yeah.
it was not finesse. I can share that with you. And my partners will assure you of that. And now, that being said, should we have maybe applied a little finesse here? I think that's what we just reorged and re-strategized, because we'd run, I think, the runway out on grit and just muscle. And it now is time to provide some smarts and finesse. But does that mean that we let go of grit? No. And that's, we're going to hold on to it. And like you, I had my prior boss he was a prophet of this, and he was a great teacher. And as many times as I disagree with him on certain things, I have to give him credit for the fact that, there was no bending. He had a saying, A is A. It comes from Ayn Rand, and A is A. You either hit the number or you didn't hit the number. There is nothing in between. And you know, what your responsibilities are clear on either side. If you don't hit the number, here's your responsibilities. If you do hit the number, here, there, and you just didn't. Once you learned that, it's okay. I mean, you know, I'm very clear on where I need to be. We've lost that clarity, and there's all sorts of different ways of saying how is the, you know, the clients, you know, how are we impacting the client positively? Well, we can, you know, today's world, we can design that 27 different ways, but the client can, if the client tells us they're not happy with it, well, we can rationalize it because of a number of different factors. There is no rationalization. They're the end determiner. And, you know, if you're not fighting to keep that, and in reality, then I think we're losing ground. So, you know, I try to share that with our young professional employees. And it's a hard message. And of course, they look at me, I'm getting that look now, like, you know, sometimes you're the crazy uncle when you're talking to them, because the one that they remember from, you know, from Thanksgiving dinner that only shows up once a year, and that's why. But it's what I learned, and I track my former boss, and they still operate under that, and it gives me hope that, you know what, it's going to come back to this. It has to. Yeah. That has to be a component. I think you can add technology, we can add systems, we can be smart, we can finesse, but if there isn't an underlying foundation of that grit, organizations are going to struggle.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. It kind of goes into the next topic that I wanted to ask you about, the future of wealth management. I mean, from your perspective, what do you foresee as the future of financial planning industry? Are there emerging trends or technologies that you think could significantly impact this industry?
Well, yeah, I've been vocal about one of the trends. The aggregation trend is concerning. I mean, again, you know, looking at the evolution of this industry, it all started with a W-2 employee at a bank or wirehouse. And then it fragmented with an independent focus through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And even to where we got to where we had a fragmented fiduciary focus, you know, that focus on the client. And now what you're seeing is the reaggregation of this. And you have to ask yourself, at the end of the day, with all the private equity and aggregator money, where does this money end up? Who is big enough to buy from the private equity firms? Because as we know, they're not long-term players. So when they bundle up these sizable enterprises, who ultimately has the capital? That's who those people are going to be working for. And that's who's going to be in control. And there was a point in time in the industry that inspired me, was that I could step out, do the right thing for the client, maintain compliance under the SEC. But, you know, as long as I did those things, it was between me and my client. And if I could find them, I did the work for them, they kept me. And today, when I look at, you know, people that talk about starting a firm, it's just a different equation. And the pressure that the aggregation has caused. And then we have outside forces, like this aggregation of our custodians and our vendors. And the reliance we have now on a smaller number that are actually competing with us, that are actually coming into the space and competing, whether it's directly or indirectly, or, you know, it's competing. And I'm not afraid of competition. The point is that am I going to hobble myself by enabling them and paying them to compete with me? And I think that trend, to me, and where people land in terms of their business enterprise and their intent with their firm, and again, this is what we just reorganized for, is we intentionally want to maintain that independent voice to our clients. And for us to do that, we had to put a serious plan together as to how we maintain relevance. And at $4 billion, we don't think that's going to be the number. It needs to be a couple multiples of $4 billion to be actually relevant and insulated from some of the exterior effects going on in the industry. So, I mean, to me, that is right at the top of the page.
Mm-hmm. Hold that thought, because you're about to answer my next question that which is always my favorite question when we're on our podcast. You talk about 4 billion right there. What do you see as the future of CG? What's the number that you guys are looking to get to? What's the size that you guys are looking to get to? And what's the future there? 5,
I
10
mean,
years out?
the first $4 billion, as I said, came with grit and muscle. The next multiples need to come with a lot more strategy, a lot more finesse, a lot more efficiency than we did the first. So it's got to be the right type of growth, which we think we've stepped back and aligned that so that it's part of our strategic plan. But I do think that with what's in the opportunity of the market is creating a 10 to $20 billion firm is going to be necessary. It's not just do I want to do it? It's, I think, to ensure viability for my next group of young leaders that are in our firm, and that's really what it's take care of our clients. And we brought a lot of young, good people into our firm that stepped into the leadership and management categories. How do we create this insulated firm that is going to live for the next 10 years that they can be part of, that doesn't have that's not susceptible from a risk standpoint to what the market forces are. So I think it has to be in that 10 to 20 billion space, and that enables you enough size and scale to stay. And then you have to be close to refined strategy. This kind of bring them all in and then we'll sort it out later idea. We practiced that for a lot of years, and that has to be refined and focused.
I like that.
Right. And can you elaborate on a little bit, like what would you consider like the strategy that you think is going to be the most important to separate yourself apart from the others in the industry and get you to that point?
Well, focusing on what makes us different from them. And I think, to us, it boiled down to, our approach, how we approach all of our clients, whether they be our retail individual clients or our actual advisors, and how we recognize they're unique in where they're at in their life cycle stage, their business stage, and then we meet their demands as to where they are and advise them based on that. Our process, how we follow and stick to process now to maintain efficiency, to ask questions, to make sure that we address the things on a measurable scale that can be replicated and performed over time. And then thirdly, our advocacy. We feel very strongly about maintaining an independent voice for our clients as well as for our advisors. And they have to know that at the end of the day, we're looking out for them as we would look out for ourselves. And, that's where I think that strategy, and we say that, and that's been mixed. I think that's not something fairly new over the last 20 years, but I think because of the different forces in the industry, it's been changed and shaded. And I'm not saying we're the only firm doing that, but I'm saying that there are far fewer firms that can stand by that.
Right. And
oh, go for it. Sorry, Ashley.
Oh, I mean, I was going to go into another topic here. But I was going to ask you, are there any specific investment sectors or opportunities that currently excite you and you think could potentially lead to the next wave of wealth creation?
In terms of investment sectors, we believe in a diversified portfolio. We tend to operate from, we'll take a little bit of a strategic overlay and allows us about a 15 to 20% lean on certain industries and or asset classes over the course of time. But to us, what we tell our clients is it's really where the real juice in investing is, where the real return is how close we can get them to the wealth they've created, is helping identify it, align it with the purpose that they want it to be used for the remainder of time that they're there, and it's there. Meaning, while you're here with your wealth, what do you want to do with it? And the more we can get you to do and follow your purpose, the happier you're going to be. Because more returns, if they're not using it the way they want to use it, doesn't really get us close to the client. And the second thing is it going where you want it to go when you're gone? And is it going to follow the purpose of what you feel is important for the next generation, the next charity, wherever it goes? Does it track your purpose? That's the real return to the investor, to us, because they created this wealth to not just grow indefinitely. They created it to do things.
Right.
And the closer we can tie them to enable them to do the things specifically they want it to do, that's the return. And that's what our clients tell us. Very few of our meetings, if we've done it properly, if we've done our engagement properly, is ever about returns on the portfolios.
And let me ask you this, this kind of leads into our final question there. What's your prediction of the future of of wealth? Well, I wouldn't say wealth management. I'm going to say our economy, these interest rates, where the market's at right now, how the market rebounded from last year. The amount of stimulus money that was dished out, 10-year treasury being, well, I mean, it's down from 5% now down into the low fours, obviously controlling mortgage interest rates, controlling, car loans, credit card interest rates and whatnot. What type of effect do you see that having on the consumer? And what do you think is on our horizon there?
Well, I mean, Mike, I speak too directly to be a very good economist. But that's probably one of the things my clients like, because they bring me into meetings just to kind of explain this to clients. But look, it's, I hate to use the term, it's unprecedented. When have we ever seen M2 money supply extended? I mean, it is on a mountain chart. It's 5 times the nearest decade or experience we've had over the history of the country where we've extended that much capital. Now, I'm not debating why they did it, and I'm not, but the point now is now it gets accounted for, right? And we've got to work that back through the system. And our positioning, at least with our clients, is to be very cautious about multiple setbacks in this process. It won't be a straight line. I mean, as much as everybody wants to know is one soft landing or whatever theory that you believe in, we're saying it's, our positioning is not that that's going to be true. We're going to have a few setbacks. We're going to have a few opportunities, and we need to make sure we've got capital aligned to take advantage of both and to protect for both, because that going forward, it's just going to be very unpredictable. I think that, I live in a state right now in Michigan, in the Midwest, where there's an evolving economy on the macro scale, right? I mean, we have kind of growing regions and or states, and we've got declining regions and or states. And it's really the haves and the have-nots, and how that balances according to regional economies and how people within the country kind of adjust to that. I mean, you've got a population moving trend, and again, I won't get into the politics of all that, but I mean, it's just, the reality is they're moving for reasons, and that's creating economic imbalances. And how are we adjusting for that? Because we're still a manufacturing location state.
Yeah.
And there was a middle class built on producing something locally that provided jobs, that provided a different, I think most people know that higher ed, that kind of the runway on higher ed for everybody has been determined that it's not for everybody. We need another track for other students that come out of high school that maybe higher ed's not their specialty or skill set, but it needs to be another track. There used to be places they could go practice trade, practice skills, develop skills in another location other than a university.
Right.
And sometimes that was the manufacturing floor here in Michigan. And they followed their father or their uncle or their mom in and said, let me introduce you to the person, see if we can get you on the list for a job. And then they learned their skill and trade there. They had a whole career. That's gone now.
Yeah.
That's gone. Mm-hmm. And with it is the idea, we tried to replace it with a degree from a college. And now we're seeing the effect of that, which is a lot of those people weren't suited for that.
Right.
So as an how are we going to adjust to that? And then now you introduce this concept of AI speeding this up, which is there, and that factors to be there. I don't know. I mean, that when I look at those trends are starting to collide now. This was starting to collide, and with the effect of the money supply, what that's done to the overall economic effect, raising interest rates to try to bring that back in line. And it's as though some of these bills are due. We've kind of lived on past due on some of these for a while, and my theory is the bill's coming due here shortly. It's the time frame.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Wow.
I appreciate your insight on that as well.
Yeah, I think that's really just the perfect way to wrap this up today. Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show with us. Thank you for sharing your invaluable insights and experience with us and our audience. It was a great time talking to you today.
Thanks. I appreciate your time as well.
Thank you. And a big thank you to our listeners as well for tuning in to another episode of the What Matters podcast. Stay tuned for more intriguing discussions in our upcoming episodes. Until next time, thanks everyone.